I'm going to be talking to you about two of our tools that are actually combined together. So if you use MDRapid, MDTransform is part of MDRapid. The really nice part about that is that it gives us both sets of features together. You can buy MDRapid without having our MD change management product, but most of our customers that use MDRapid use the full-blown product suite. That being said, a little bit about what Rapid allows us to do. It helps us to manage data changes and updates to data files in a staging area without impacting production until all the work is complete. So it lets us reorg large files. It lets us make database changes to existing files, which would be so time consuming. We normally couldn't afford the downtime to make a change to a file. One of the most popular reasons for MDRapid today is the number of field expansion projects that are going on. When we wrote that code, 40 years ago or 30 years ago, we didn't anticipate that our invoice number would need to be so much bigger, or that the product numbers would, we'd have more products than we had product numbers to provide. So all of a sudden, we needed field expansion projects. So those are one of the things that MDRapid helps people to do, is to expand fields and actually make those types of database changes. It also supports DDS to DDL, whether or not you are doing the surrogate method or truly changing the name of your table, etc. MDCMS helps you to manage it, get all the right data there, but Rapid's what makes it fast. Building partition tables with a minimum amount of downtime. With MDRapid, it's still going to take time to do the work, but the work happens behind the scenes. So the downtime is a matter of a few subseconds as opposed to a long extended period of time while there's locks on our objects in production, which is never a good thing. With MDTransform, this is kind of the engine inside of MDRapid, and it generates SQL for us so that we can eliminate most of the conversion programs that we might need to use, or post-install plug programs to put the data in a field after we've expanded the file. Those types of things. Transform generates SQL statements for us to make it very easy to make those types of changes. It also works with another feature inside of MD Change that is called data copy templates, which allows us to refresh data from across partitions. And as we do that, we can select specifically what files within a library that we're going to refresh. We can tell it even set conditions on what records in that file we want to refresh. We can obfuscate data, mask or scramble confidential data so that it can come across to a test system without being a security breach. Those types of things are all built into MDTransform, which is our engine inside of MDRapid. So now all of a sudden we have all kinds of things that we can do with SQL to make things faster. Even just the copy itself is so much faster using an insert SQL statement. So we get a lot of performance bang for this to make life a whole lot easier. The most important things that it does is it minimizes the impact on production. I can make the changes behind the scenes without locking my production data files. And at the time that I'm ready to go live is the only time I have to have a lock on that object. So it may take a long time to copy those billion record files, and rebuild all the indexes, but we don't care because we're not affecting production at that point. There's all kinds of performance tools built into the way that we build these processes, so it minimizes any impact on performance in production while the data is being massaged and rebuilt and put into these new file structures. It also gives us great updates on what's happening. There is a dashboard that lets us know what's going on. So the behind the scenes, we're in control of that process. One of the coolest things that I love is the way that it reduces risk. One of the things that I can do as I am building these new versions of my tables, whether it's a field expansion project or I'm populating new fields or whatever I happen to be doing, I can actually go and look at that data that I'm building in my staging area to verify it looks correct before I say, okay, now go live. So if anything went wrong and I don't like the way it looks, I lost the time it took to get me to that point, but I have not affected production in any way. So from a risk perspective, it lessens the risk significantly. So we can make sure that those things happen, and they happen when we want them to happen. So I can specify an installation window and have the whole process automated. I can kick off Rapid, let it be an automated process, let it install at a certain period of time during the day when you know that there's downtime available. I can run this in a test environment or a production environment anytime I think that it's an important time for that change to occur. So we get to control that, and it really lessens our risk. So here we are, we're in VS Code. So for everybody that is used to RDI, we do have an RDI perspective for MD Open as well as a VS Code perspective. But today we're doing this in VS Code, as it happens to be my favorite. And I really like the way these screens function. I think they're very easy to work with. So the first thing that I'm going to talk about is making a change. So I have in my environment today a file which has almost 2 million records in it, and a logical file over that table. So it's an SQL table. It has a couple of million records in it. I didn't want it to take too long, so I kept it kind of small, but it could have 2 billion records and it would still work for us, you know. So let's, whether it's a partition table or it's a SQL table or a physical file. So this works for physical files as well as SQL tables, and it rebuilds all of the things that have to do with those objects. So for SQL tables, it manages constraints and triggers and all of the things that we have, field procs, any of those types of things that we might do that are unique to tables are all supported within the MD tools. So here I have a table, and that table is going to go through this change process. I have a logical file built over this table. My MD transform tool here is the tool that generates the SQL table change for me. So it will look at what fields that I am mapping to, what I've changed, allows me to modify any of these fields and use any valid parameter that is there for SQL. And if I can do it in SQL in an insert statement, then I should be able to do it in MD transform. So I can change this value, I can populate a new field, I can do all kinds of things with an insert SQL statement, and MDCMS generates that insert SQL statement for us. So behind the scenes is building that statement to make it easier for you to look at. And then from that, I could copy and paste that and run it and test it, and make sure it's doing exactly what I wanted it to do. But it's a very straightforward process for developers, especially those that are not real comfortable with SQL yet, because it's generating the statement for us. You know that the syntax checking is going to be great. We do a validation of that syntax as we go through and start the promotion process. So the first thing that I'm doing is I have two objects. They're sitting on something we call an RFP. RFP stands for Request for Promote, and it's our way of packaging our objects together that are going to move as one set of changes. So as I am looking at these objects, I know that I may need to create them, and I can create them directly from here. I can edit the source directly from here. And when I am happy with the changes that I've made, and I have the opportunity then to move it into my test environment. Very straightforward to move it into test with MDCMS. I am just going to click the up arrow, and it is going to take those objects and submit them for processing. And I'm going to hit confirm, and it's going to go ahead and submit those into my test environment. My test environment is not initiating Rapid, because I can control that at each level, and I can control how many records are in the file before I trigger MDRapid to run. So that makes it very easy to do. I'm sorry, I'm not sure why that flipped over. Oh, probably because that popped up. So I got an update that lets me know that that has now been installed. And if I go out here, we will see that my change has already been installed into level 10, which is my test environment. And then if I go back over to my active RFPs, I will have a new RFP out here to go to production. This is when my MDRapid is going to be triggered. So I'm going to go ahead and submit this. And what you're going to see down here is that MDCMS is allowing us, I'm sorry, I keep having this little thing that's in the way. I put it up and down and I just can't get rid of the bar. So here I'm going to hit confirm and it's going to go ahead and submit this to process. With the way that our process works is it compiles everything into a staging area to make sure that everything is going to work. It has 20 some odd different checks that happen to make sure my SQL looks okay, that I'm supposed to be making this change, that all those right things happen. And then if I've required an approval, then the approval step is there waiting for me to go through the approval. So I'm going to go ahead and select the approval and start the approval process. And when I do that, then it is going to come back and tell me I'm waiting on Rapid to start. So I've set this up as separate steps. I could automate that step, but I've set it up as a separate step to say, okay, now I'm ready to kick off my data copy. So this is when the data is going to start copying in the process. Again, in production, nothing has been impacted. There is no changes happening in production based on what I've done. Everything is running the way it's been running for the last week or whatever. So here I am going to submit my Rapid. I'm going to say launch, and MDRapid is going to launch a job or a group of jobs. So when I am making a change like this, if I have one version of that file out there on my system, it will start Rapid for that one version of the file. If I have something that in MD we call replication templates, but let's say I have 5 divisions. So I have 5 different libraries. They all have the same file structure, but each of those different libraries has different division data. So MDCMS will actually build all of those simultaneously because we cannot impact the way that that's going to work. So here we're going to let that process happen. And I am going to come out here and you can see here what percentage of completion there is. I can click on the file. It shows me the detail of the file, when it started copying, what journal receiver it's using, because what MD is going to do behind the scenes is actually use those journals. So I'm going to flip over for just a moment and bring this picture up that talks a little bit about what MDRapid is doing. So when we submitted that, it staged those files in a library. When we triggered the Rapid process to begin, it starts to copy the data using our MD transform tool to map that data into the new file structure. And that will continue until all the data is copied. Then all the indexes get built. And then we have a monitoring job that will stay active and continue to read the journal receivers, ones that already exist, or we add them. And it will continue to update the new version of the file in the staging library with whatever changes are occurring in production. So all the time that this data copy is happening, we're capturing what's changed in that file so we can apply that to the file. And then when we get to that final point, when it's 100%, that's when we need a lock on the file. And when we do the lock on the file, what's going to happen is MD is going to have a backup library over here for that table and those indexes, and it's going to do a move object and move those objects out. We all know on the IDMI, when I do a move object, I'm changing a pointer and boom, I'm there. So I've got a lock on that object in production. That's when I'm going to do the move. And then everything's available in production again. So I'm going to go back to RDI. I'm sorry, VS Code. And sorry about that. And I am going to refresh this screen and we're going to see how far along we are. We're at 100% copied. So that lets me know all of the records for this file have been copied. It's a little over 1 million records. and the index has been built, and my monitoring job is keeping everything in sync. So if database changes were occurring, then those database changes would have been applied as part of that process. Now I know I'm ready to roll. I am ready to go live with this file. If I come back out here and I hit the refresh button, what we see here is the ability to do the install step. So when I hit that install, that means that I am going to be putting that file into my production environment, and that process is going to happen very, very quickly. So that install happens, and my changes are being put into production. And for any of the RFPs that I am processing, and my process is completed. So I'm going to come back over here and I'm going to show you a little bit about what happened. So when I come over to here to my file, my RFP that processed, I'm going to go to my deployment log, and I'm going to see exactly what MDCMS did. So it built a temporary library. It applied all of my security in place. I have launched MDRapid, and Rapid happened behind the scenes. Now I'm ready to go. This is where my installation process began. And if we take a quick look at this, and I have to move another piece of stuff out of my way, and oops, all right. And so here I can see when my installation started. My lock was at 5554, and all the objects are moved in. My unlock is at 5603. That's 2 seconds to move that file and its logicals into production. That's how quickly it happens. Then, of course, we have all of our housekeeping that happens after the fact, but the locks have been released. The objects are available for production processing. So for something that would have taken, in this case, pretty quick, 4 minutes, not all that long, but I'm not affecting production then during those 4 minutes. I am doing that behind the scenes. My go live is a couple of seconds. Now, if that had taken 14 hours to do that copy and build the 110 indexes, then boom, that is a huge savings. So I kept it simple, so it happened very quickly today. But most of my customers are doing files that take anywhere from 30 minutes to several hours to build in the background with all the indexes. And then their go live is still that same couple of seconds to make it happen. So that's what MDCMS helps us to do with our MDRapid product. And I just wanted you guys to have a chance to see what that looks like. Here's a kind of a customer function that they did. They had 2,000 tables. They were going from DDS to DDL. They had billions of records, thousands of programs, and they had estimated how long it would take without using a tool, and it was going to take them 3 weeks of downtime. Well, obviously nobody can afford 3 weeks of downtime, so they looked for alternatives, and they came up with MDCMS with all of the programs, all of the tables, everything moving into production. It took them less than 2 hours to do that process.